I still see him, framed in the doorway of the banquet hall, cheeks flushed and eyes darting around as if searching for an escape hatch. My dad, rock-solid pillar of pride and exasperation in equal measure, had already launched into his trademark monologue by the time I slipped through the double doors. "Matt, you old so-and-so, I can't believe you dragged me into this circus," he hissed, voice low but urgent. He took my arm, steering me away from the catering tables where shrimp cocktails glistened like two promising promises. "Why'd you tell them I'm your dad? You know how these corporate types love the drama." I let him pull me toward a darkened alcove by the window. Rain tapped a nervous rhythm on the glass behind us. My heart thumped so hard I thought the staff with their silver trays might hear it. "Because you insisted," I whispered back, trying to keep my own irritation in check. "And I thought it'd be funny," Dad groaned. "Funny? You embarrassed me right when Mr. Caldwell was about to call me up for that 20-year service award. Now everyone thinks you're some kind of nepotism case." I closed my eyes, picturing Mr. Caldwell, our branch's new regional director, mid-speech, eyebrows raised as he introduced me as the son of a valued colleague. The mortified flush on Dad's face had been, admittedly, priceless. But that was before I corrected him in front of the crowd, reminded him that in fact I was technically Mr. Caldwell's boss. Dad's jaw had dropped so low, I thought I might have to help him pick it up off the stage. "It's not nepotism," I muttered, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. My job title, Senior Vice President of Operations, Northeast Region, felt too heavy on my resume to drag it through this mess. I'm the one who orchestrated the merger. I report directly to corporate HQ, not to Caldwell. His eyes narrowed. "You what? When did this happen?" I took a breath. 6 weeks ago. They announced the restructuring last month. I've been here since Monday." Dad's face went pale. For a moment he stood there, mouth open, staring like someone who just discovered his house was actually floating in midair. Then he clapped a hand to his forehead. "Are you kidding me? You're my new boss's boss? You did this behind my back?" I unfolded my arms. "I applied for the position. You know I've been looking to move up." And when the opportunity opened, he waved his hand dismissively. "Opportunity? That's not opportunity, that's betrayal." I sighed. "Dad, it's business. You think I wanted to trick you? I thought I could let you in on the secret after the shout-outs were over. Make it a surprise." But the whole "I'm Matt's son's" bit derailed everything. He leaned back against the window frame, rain blurring the city lights behind him. In that moment his shoulders slumped, the self-assured Elvis impersonator swagger gone. I hadn't seen him like this since high school graduation, when I told him I wanted to change my major from engineering to marketing. He'd stared at me like I'd declared I was joining the circus. "Marketing was a mistake," he'd growled back then, only half joking. "You're always chasing some fancy idea instead of doing something real." Now he looked more defeated than I'd ever seen. I stepped closer. "It's not a mistake, Dad. It's just different. And you're still going to get your award. You're still being honored for your 20 years. His eyes flicked sideways. "You can fix that, right? Make sure nobody thinks the boss's boss is playing favorites." He cleared his throat. "Make me look good." I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. "You're already looking good. You've got 4 promotions, Employee of the Year twice, and you're the heart and soul of this place." He snorted. "Heart and soul," he repeated. "They'll hear that and think I'm going soft. You think Mr. Caldwell would appreciate a soul talk?" I rubbed his shoulder. "He'll get it. He respects you." He gave me a skeptical stare but didn't argue. Instead he straightened his tie and smoothed down the lapel of his jacket, as if readying himself for battle. "Fine. But you owe me." I held up my hands. "Name it." The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the room as Caldwell stepped back to the podium, cleared his throat, and launched into a heartfelt tribute about long service and dedication. Dad sat at the head table, back ramrod straight, eyes fixed on Caldwell's face. I hovered at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of it all. "Tonight we honor Michael Turner," Caldwell intoned, voice echoing. 20 years of unwavering commitment. I saw Dad's chest swell with pride, shoulders back. He flashed a thumb in my direction, half wave, half flex, and mouthed, "See?" I grinned and offered a subtle nod. But I didn't stay to see the standing ovation or the round of applause, the flashing cameras, the silver plaque inscribed with Dad's name. Instead, I drifted through the crowd, shaking hands, collecting business cards. CEO, founder, that, regional manager here, and mentally mapping out every relationship. Because make no mistake, I was the one who held the strings now. When I returned to the edge of the room, Dad was already swarmed by colleagues wanting selfies, handshakes, the grand tour of his family's legendary commitment to the company man. He spotted me and shrugged, as though to say, "Thanks for not making me look like a fool." I gave him a thumbs up and stepped toward the bar. "Scotch neat," I told the bartender, handing over my card. A sharp knock tapped at my shoulder. "Mr. Youssef?" A voice, cool and crisp. I turned to see Caldwell himself, the very subject of our small drama. He held out a hand. "Congratulations on the big announcement today. I hope you're finding everything to your liking." I studied his face. He was younger than I'd expected. Late 30s, dark suit, perfectly tousled hair, an expression that suggested he was always calculating 3 moves ahead. I shook his hand. "Thank you. It's been an interesting week." "Interesting, yes." He tilted his head, gaze sharp. "I heard your father was quite the star tonight." I laughed low. "Yeah, he's not exactly shy about tooting his own horn." "I gather you had something to do with tonight's surprise." I shrugged. "Maybe a little." The first drops of rain trailed down the window behind him, like tears of joy or sorrow. I couldn't tell which. He regarded me, silent, then a small smile played on his lips. "Well, if you ever want to switch roles, let me know. I could always use a good manager." I raised my glass. "Deal." He clinked against it, then turned on his heel and melted back into the crowd, leaving me alone with the amber whiskey and my dad's triumphant grin. The next morning, Dad called me at 6:30 a.m., voice grave and conspiratorial. "Matt, you gotta help me. I'm on the hook for this year's charity golf tournament sponsorship. They want the branch to, I don't know, buy 12 foursomes, give me the killer speech I can use." I yawned, stifled a groan. "Dad, do you even like golf?" He laughed, a nervous bark. "Doesn't matter. It's the big event, board members, donors, local press. If I don't look like I care, I'll be toast." I rubbed my eyes. All right. Send me what you've got so far." 20 minutes later, I was sifting through a half-finished PowerPoint, filled with clip art of smiling people shaking hands on putting greens. The font was Comic Sans. The charts were leaning at jaunty angles, like they were going to tip over at any moment. I took a sip of coffee and began rewriting. I made the opening anecdote about his first year, back when the office was in a basement, and the heating unit blasted like a jet engine. I wove in a heartfelt moment about his kids crashing into his briefcase during family visits, getting ink on Dad's crisp white shirts, and how that chaos had taught him to find humor amid disorder. When I finished, I sent the deck back with a note. "Make it yours. Throw away the clip art." Within minutes, Dad's appreciative voice crackled through my phone speaker. "You're a lifesaver. Seriously. How do I ever repay you?" I sighed. "You still owe me big time." He chuckled. "Deal." Random question. Why aren't you in our old office downtown anymore? Are you moving? Vacation? I hesitated. Just switched spaces. Figured it'd be better to be closer to the new team.
You team?
He sounded alarmed. "Matt, what are you not telling me?" I closed my eyes. I realized in that moment I'd been hiding our entire professional relationship from him. The promotion, the move to corporate HQ, the direct line to the board. I'd kept it all hush-hush, because I wanted him to see me as his son first, not the guy in charge. He was silent on the line, and I imagined him pacing by the window, similar to last night, only this time alone. "Dad," I said softly, "I didn't mean to shut you out. I wanted you to be proud of me, without feeling like I was using you." "Using me?" he echoed, voice distant. I took a breath. "Look, let's talk tonight. Dinner's on me." There was a pause, then a soft, almost tender. That evening, I arrived at his favorite Italian restaurant, a cozy little spot with checkered tablecloths and candles that flickered like old souls. He was already there, dressed in his good casual blazer, looking both triumphant and vulnerable. His usually booming voice was subdued as I slid into the booth across from him. We ordered antipasti, a plate of prosciutto, fresh mozzarella, olives slick with oil. The waiter poured our wine, a bold red that stained my teeth and warmed my veins. Dad looked across the table. "So, What's this about the new team? I reached for the breadbasket. I got promoted. Head of operations for 5 branches. I manage regional directors, including Caldwell. He blinked. You manage Caldwell? I nodded. I gave him his job. He took a sip of wine, let it roll over his tongue. I thought you were just consulting. I laughed, a little ruefully. Consulting's fun, but I wanted real responsibility. He studied me. Responsibility? That's a big word for you, Matt. I shrugged. I figured it was time to stop playing it safe. He reached across the table, covered my hand with his. The first time I'd felt such closeness since I was a kid complaining about my lunchbox sandwiches. I'm proud of you, he said, voice thick. But a little warning next time would be nice. I smiled. Deal. Then he leaned in, conspiratorial again. So tell me everything. How's Caldwell? What's he like in person? I told him about Caldwell's dry wit, how he loved to quote obscure economists at meetings, and how he once showed up at a client pitch, wearing mismatched socks because he'd been up late reading about behavioral finance. Dad laughed so hard his wine sloshed. That's rich. We spent the rest of the evening talking shop. Dad's plans for the charity golf tournament, my upcoming board presentations, the art of negotiating with stubborn clients. At one point, the waiter brought tiramisu, and Dad closed his eyes in blissful surrender, spoonful by spoonful. By the time we paged the check, the restaurant had emptied, except for a few late-night stragglers. The candles flickered low, and outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a slick sheen on the pavement. He stood, straightened his jacket, then paused and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. You've come a long way, kiddo. I hugged him, brief, firm, then pulled back. Thanks, Dad. As we stepped into the night, I realized I'd gained more than a promotion. I'd found a new respect between us, forged in the awkward fires of embarrassment and pride. And though I was still his son, the one who forgot how to use Comic Sans and who embarrassed him on stage, I was also his equal in ambition, in drive, and in the fierce desire to carve our own paths, together. We walked to the car beneath street lamps, silent for a moment. Then Dad cleared his throat. You still owe me that speech for the tournament. I laughed. On it, boss. The weeks that followed our dinner at Luigi's felt like stepping onto a high wire without a safety net. Every balance a choice between falling back into old patterns or forging something new. I dove into my role with a mixture of exhilaration and terror, learning every morning that boss's boss meant something far bigger than a corner office and a corporate title. It meant responsibility for people's livelihoods, for my father's reputation, and for the fragile bridges between pride and humility. The very next Monday, I walked into the regional offices for my first ride-along with Caldwell. He met me in the lobby, leather briefcase in hand, perfectly polished, as though he'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. Good morning, he said, voice calm and measured, like he'd been expecting me for weeks. Ready to hit the road. I nodded, following him to the parking garage where his sleek sedan waited. As we drove through morning traffic, he outlined the day's agenda: a site visit to the Newark branch, a mid-morning check-in with the compliance team, then a lunch meeting with potential client Harmony Health. I realized I hardly knew him, and that the entire region hardly knew me. I was both everybody's mystery guest and their top-down decision-maker. At Newark, we found the branch manager, Linda, a whip-smart woman who'd been there 15 years, surrounded by stacks of reports and whiteboard scribbles. Caldwell introduced me as the regional VP overseeing operations, and Linda's polite smile flickered with intrigue. I slid into her conference room chair, watching her shift her gaze between Caldwell's reassuring presence and mine, the stranger whose approval could mean budgets unlocked or initiatives frozen. Tell us about your biggest challenge this quarter, I said, leaning forward. The question felt heavy in my mouth, but Linda stared back with honest eyes. Honestly, she began, we've got a backlog of loan applications strangling our team. Clients wait weeks for a response, and morale is tanking. She gestured to the frazzled faces of her staff just outside the door. Caldwell nodded. We've reviewed the numbers. We need a solution fast. He looked at me as though urging me to deliver an answer on the spot. My mind raced. I recalled the late-night coffee sessions with Dad's old branch managers, his endless stories about customer complaints and process bottlenecks. In that moment, I dialed into the lessons he'd taught me, in his own clumsy, loving way, about treating people like people. Let's reallocate some of the Harmony Health pilot resources to Newark, I said. Give your team 2 extra hands for the next month, and let's automate the initial application triage. I've got a few engineers who can spin up a simple chatbot to handle basic queries. It won't solve everything, but it'll buy you breathing room. Linda's eyebrows shot up. That could work. Caldwell leaned back, approval in his eyes. Excellent. I'll have IT draw up the requisition today, and I'll send you the pilot specs by end of day. I swallowed. I just promised something that involved 3 branches, 2 vendors, and a strict compliance review. But I'd also sold hope, and I knew that without hope, you had nothing. Later that afternoon, I called Dad. I reallocated some resources to Newark, I told him. You okay with that? I almost laughed at how tentative I sounded. He paused, then laughed back. It's your show now. I trust you'd never gut the branch. His faith warmed me. Thanks, Dad. I'll need you to keep an eye on Harmony Health's team. I want their pilot running smooth so I'm not leaving any gaps. He cleared his throat. Anything for you, son. Just don't forget, if you ever need a seasoned pro to smooth feathers, you know where I am. I smiled into the phone. Will do. That evening, at home, I stared at the ceiling, adrenaline still humming in my veins. I realized I'd been treating leadership like a chessboard. Players to move and pieces to sacrifice, until that moment with Linda, when I saw the strain in her team's eyes. Leadership wasn't just about strategy, it was about empathy. It was about listening harder than you spoke, and offering solutions, not edicts. A week later, I flew to Chicago for a national leadership summit. I stood backstage, blazer sharp, palms clammy, about to speak to 200 regional directors. My speech was titled, Bridging the Gaps, but inside I felt more like a terrified teenager preparing for a talent show. I pictured Dad in the front row, hideously proud or mortified, and wondered how he'd react if he knew I'd dedicated half my talk to anecdotes about his bungled attempt at karaoke during our holiday party 2 years ago. But those stories were gold. They humanized me, connected me to my audience. When I walked on stage, the auditorium lights swelled, and the silence was thunderous. I paused, scanning the faces, then dove in. I'm not here today as your boss. I'm here as someone who stumbled, fumbled, and yes, embarrassed myself more times than I can count. But each misstep taught me something about humility, about the power of candid communication. Let me tell you about my dad. The next 20 minutes were a blur of laughter, nodding heads, and shared vulnerabilities. I told them about the time he tried to network at a finance conference by wearing novelty cufflinks shaped like dollar signs, only to realize halfway through his pitch that one earring had fallen out. I recounted how he once accidentally hit reply all when he meant to send a private joke to me, flooding the entire office with our family banter. With each story, the room relaxed, and by the end, the standing ovation felt like a shared embrace. It wasn't just my victory, it was ours. Back in New York, I hit the ground running, emails and project plans piling up. Harmony Health's pilot launched without a hitch, winning praise from the board. Newark's backlog shrank week by week. Caldwell's quarterly review call felt more like a collaboration than a performance review. He told me he'd been fielding calls from corporate HQ, asking, "Who is this Jordan guy?" and praising the humanized approach we were taking. I credited the team in Dad's old school lessons every chance I got. But then came the unexpected twist, an acquisition offer. A global conglomerate reached out, offering to buy our regional operations for a handsome sum. They loved our culture, our numbers, and our blueprint for combining tech with touch. They wanted to roll us into their network, expand our model worldwide. Overnight, my inbox filled with due diligence requests and NDA templates. The offer was 6 figures more than our current valuation, enough to make my head spin and my heart race. It was every capitalist's dream. As I mulled the decision, I found myself back in my childhood bedroom, now repurposed as my home office, and scrolling through old photo albums. I saw myself at 10 years old, beaming in a homemade Halloween costume, Dad's arm around me, both of us laughing as if nothing else in the world mattered. I remembered a conversation we had then, after he'd bought me that candy-filled bucket that broke within minutes. I'd complained bitterly, and he'd looked at me and said, "It's not about the perfect costume or the perfect bucket, it's about how you share the moment." I realized in that instant that the decision wasn't about the price tag. It was about whether I wanted to preserve that moment, the sense of shared ownership, of people-first ethos, or trade it for corporate scale. I called Dad again. "They're offering to buy us out," I said, voice low. He whistled. "That's huge. What are you thinking?" I paused. Part of me wants to say yes, but another part, I don't want to lose what we built. He cleared his throat. Son, there's no right answer. But whatever you choose, do it for the team. Do it for the story. I hung up and drafted my response. Thank you for the offer. We appreciate it, but we're going to stay independent for now. We believe there's more we can do with the autonomy we've earned. My finger hovered over send as I took a breath. Then I clicked. The next morning, the news rippled through our offices. Some rejoiced, others were skeptical. But I made sure the message was clear. We were staying true to our values. I pledged to invest in new training programs, expand wellness initiatives, and open a mentorship fund so that every junior team member had a chance to grow, just as I had. I wanted to show that leadership wasn't about exits. It was about entrances, entering hearts, minds, and communities. A month later, at the annual company retreat, we gathered around a bonfire beneath star-speckled skies. Dad sat beside me, roasting marshmallows like he'd done when I was a kid. Around us were teammates from Newark, Chicago, and Boston, some wearing Blue Bridge hoodies, others clutching mugs of hot cocoa. I stood before them, the crackling fire painting my face in orange hues. Years ago, I began, voice carrying over the flames. I embarrassed my dad in front of his entire branch. I thought I'd scared him, humiliated him. But what I learned was that embarrassment can be a bridge, a way to connect, to grow, to share our most human selves. I looked at Dad, whose eyes glistened. Tonight, I want to say thank you for teaching me that authenticity is our greatest currency, and that a son's greatest pride is lifting his father, and everyone around him, higher than we ever dreamed possible. A hush fell. Then the crowd erupted into applause. Dad stood, wrapped me in a hug so fierce, I felt like I might collapse, then pulled back and winked at the others. "That's my boy," he said. "Always knew you had it in you." I realized then that the title boss's boss was secondary to being someone's boss in the truest sense, someone who leads with heart, who listens, who embraces vulnerability as strength. That night, as we sat by the dying embers and shared stories until the dawn stole our voices, I knew we had built something that would outlast any merger or acquisition. A culture rooted in honesty, respect, and an occasional public embarrassment that reminded us we're all perfectly imperfect. And as the first light of morning crept across the horizon, I saw my father's proud smile, and I understood at last that our journey, his and mine, was never about climbing ladders. It was about carving new paths together, step by imperfect step, toward a future we both could stand behind.